mind. So we'd like to take a silent moment to think about the victims of the terrible humanitarian crisis and to thank the countries that are welcoming refugees, especially Ukraine's closest neighbors that include Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Moldova, and Hungary. And in addition, let's remember the many organizations and volunteers who are stepping forward to help. So just a moment of silence. So today's gathering is about gratitude. We're blessed to live in a peaceful society where the threads have been woven together from various cultures to make a fabric that is stronger and warmer than any of the threads would be by themselves. I'd like to recognize two special qualities of that fortunate fabric that we're thankful for today. First, we appreciate our shared land. Here in Vancouver, we're meeting on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for sharing and for having cared for these lands and waters for thousands of years. Second, we're thankful for our healthcare system. Modern medicine is developed from diverse cultural threads, including science, people skills, systems management, and the professional commitment of thousands of healthcare providers. Our routine expectations of health and longevity could scarcely have been imagined just 100 years ago. And today we are thankful in particular for the civil courage of those who have provided health care to British Columbians during the pandemic of the COVID-19 disease. They have faced new, deadly, communicable disease with unknown risks to their own and their family's health. They've worked to exhaustion under the most stressful conditions, saving lives and comforting families. And then when vaccines became available, the healthcare workers extended themselves even further so that we could all be immunized. Unfortunately, as some people have tired of public health restrictions, healthcare workers have been subjected to harassment and threats, and still they're there for us when we need them, no matter what problem we might bring. Today's speakers represent three groups of healthcare providers that have shown exceptional civil courage during these difficult years. Their first-hand stories will be educational for us all. Before our speakers are introduced, I'd like to take a moment to give some background about our organization and the concept of civil courage. Raoul Wallenberg was a Swedish architect, businessman, diplomat, and humanitarian. He became Sweden's special envoy to Hungary in the summer of 1944, a few months after the Nazis had begun deporting Hungarian Jews. At great personal risk, he issued protective passports and he designated buildings in Budapest that were Swedish territory and safe for the people. In so doing, he saved tens of thousands of Jews from deportation and death. He disappeared into Soviet captivity on January 17, 1945, and his fate is still not known. Wallenberg has been made an honorary citizen of Canada, the US, Hungary, Israel, and Australia. In the year 2000, the Canadian government designated January 17th as Raoul Wallenberg Day, and we are commemorating it here a few months later because of the pandemic. Sherri was a Japanese diplomat who served as vice consul in Lithuania during World War II. He chose to act at clear professional and personal risk to himself and to his family. He issued transport visas that allowed about 2,000 Jews, over 90% of them from Poland, to escape certain death. Both Wallenberg and Sugihara have been designated by Israel as righteous among the nations. Now, civil courage is important in a peaceful society, just as in times of violent conflict. Today in British Columbia, thank goodness there are few opportunities to oppose the kinds of murderous injustice that Wallenberg and Sugihara encountered. With this in mind, we define civil courage as an act entailing personal risk or sacrifice intended to improve or save the lives of others who endure misfortunes attributable to their social context. In even the best managed societies, some people may suffer from conflict, injustice, and there's even threats to their health and well-being, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And these are problems that are infinitely tied to our social structures. There are those who help despite personal risk, and they show the same inner strength as wartime role models like Wallenberg and Sugihara. In 2006, the former honorary Swedish consul of Vancouver, Anders Neumuller, began Vancouver's annual commemoration of Wallenberg Day. He later envisaged a nonprofit society dedicated to honoring acts of civil courage. And so the Wallenberg Sugihara Civil Courage Society was formed in 2013 by members of the Swedish and Jewish communities in Vancouver. The goal of the Civil Courage Society is to honor the legacy of Wallenberg and Sugihara by acknowledging British Columbians who have demonstrated civil courage in the past and by promoting civil courage when it is called for now. To that end, each year we formally recognize a person or group of people who have displayed civil courage in British Columbia. We also screen a film intended to get our audience thinking about the importance of civil courage and how to encourage it amongst their friends and family. We look forward to chatting with all of you at the reception following the film. We're a small organization with big aspirations, and we hope you'll visit our website. We appreciate donations and welcome any of you who might join us as volunteers. In conclusion, I'll circle back to the theme of gratitude. Just as some people in this room owe their very existence to Raoul Wallenberg or Shioni Sugihara, nearly all of us can think of a healthcare worker who has made a profound contribution to our well-being. In pandemic years, those contributions have entailed immense personal risk and sacrifice. We are grateful and we look forward to hearing about those experiences and the courageous responses of these frontline healthcare providers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith, for that very full introduction. I would also like to welcome today the consuls who are here to go join us. So now I would like to invite Christine Moyle, Councillor and Deputy Mayor of the City of Vancouver. Christine will read the proclamation for Wallenberg Day, which is dated for January 16th. By the way, that was before we had to reschedule it to the Omicron way.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to get to be here this year and to celebrate with you. And as you articulated so well, as someone from a family of healthcare workers, I keep being incredibly moved by the description of civil courage in the work that they've been doing. So really, really grateful to get to be here and to read this proclamation from on behalf of the City of Vancouver. Whereas Raoul Wallenberg was a Swedish diplomat and hero who saved the lives of thousands of people condemned to certain death by the Nazis during World War II, and whereas Raoul Wallenberg was taken into protective custody by the Soviet Union on January 17, 1945 in Hungary, never to be heard of again. And whereas the Swedish and the Jewish communities have paid tribute to Raoul Wallenberg with a plaque in Queen Elizabeth Park and annual events to commemorate the life and deeds of this outstanding honorary citizen of Canada, and whereas this year we recognize the courage of frontline healthcare workers, frontline healthcare providers who have sustained our medical system during the COVID-19 pandemic, facing risks of exposure to the dangerous virus, exhausting work demands, and irrational hostility from a minority of citizens. Now, therefore, I, Christine Boyle, on behalf of Kennedy Stewart, Mayor of the City of Vancouver, do hereby proclaim Sunday, January 16th, which we're celebrating today, as Raoul Wallenberg Day in the City of Vancouver. Thank you.
feedback here. I'm not quite sure how to improve that or lessen it. Barb is a clerk, I think you say clerk care aide from Kamloops Thompson local. She driven here yesterday? Today, in the snow. There was snow in Kamloops. Something that we haven't had for a little while. She has been an HEU member since 2006 and has held many positions up to being elected as the first woman president in 2018. As HEU president, Barb represents the union as a BC Federation of Labour officer and a Kiwi National Executive Board member.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I am deeply honored to speak with you today to mark the courage and selfless solidarity of Wallenberg. And thank you so much for inviting me. I'm here to speak on behalf of 50,000 healthcare workers from around the province and tell you their stories of courage. Our members work in hundreds of occupations in every single part of the healthcare team: carers, housekeepers, lab assistants, care home operators. We have cooks and pharmacy techs and nurses and maintenance workers and many, many, many others. They work in hospitals and clinics, care homes, and community agencies, First Nations health centers, and medical supply warehouses, and I could go on. They are absolutely everywhere. And many of our members have jobs that make them invisible, but in fact, they are the heart of the healthcare system. As you can imagine, and that's why we're all here today, is that healthcare workers have been through a really rough couple of years. In part because before the pandemic, healthcare was already under significant strain. Our members were understaffed, under-resourced, and undervalued. So when Canada's first COVID death hit a North Vancouver care home, reality had hit us hard. It was here. It was in our community, it was in our workplaces, it was deadly, and we were not ready. And while everyone who could sheltered at home, that was not an option for healthcare workers, who suddenly became the most essential workers in the world. And I was pretty new in my role at the time. I can tell you that the weight of the health and safety of 50,000 healthcare workers was pretty intense. But especially because one of those workers was my own daughter, a pharmacy technician in North Vancouver, where it all began. She was a young worker isolated from her mom, her friends, her mom, her family, but most of all, her mom. But she had a new mortgage, and a partner fresh out of work, and a deadly global pandemic, and that was more than enough stress for a young person to ever deal with. But she also had the fear of going to the hospital to go to work and having to get within inches of a patient's face who was hard of hearing and out of breath in order to communicate. The uncertainty that this very thin veil that separated them would be sufficient. The same mask that she wore all day long because they might run out. That thought was terrifying, especially in the early days when so much was unknown. Other workers had the additional fear of bringing the virus home to their children or their elderly parents, people who also depend on them for their care and attention. That burden of caretaking that falls predominantly to women was amplified for this largely female workforce. So my friend Ruby told me she would often arrive at work. She'd park her car and she would just sit there. She would just tightly wrap her hands around the steering wheel as she contemplated having to go through those doors again. She knew what was on the other side. She knew they were going to be short-staffed. After that, she was certain that the work was going to be hard, but especially hard because of an injury in her shoulder that she couldn't get treatment for. She wondered, is today I have to work a double or maybe a triple shift because there's nobody to replace me. And she lamented about who would take care of her kids so that she could take care of her residents. She knew residents were going to call out for assistance or for a loved one, and she would be torn to decide who would she help next, or if she would be able to help at all. She dreaded learning of who had passed since her last shift and prayed that one of her co-workers was able to be with them to hold their hand when they did. She cringed at the thought of putting masks over her chafed cheeks and letting up her raw hands, the very raw hands that let go of that steering wheel day after day after day. She committed herself to getting out of the car. Now, I don't mean to be dramatic and actually really I'm back because I don't want to cry in front of you all. But I do this to set the context for why we're here today. These are ordinary healthcare workers at the low end of the pay scale who are doing extraordinary work in the face of fear and uncertainty. Kiana said it best. She's a sterile supply technician from Canada, where I am. And she said, it's scary because you're risking your health to go to work, but you still go every day because you want to be on the front lines. You want to have purpose. I just wake up every day and tell myself that this job is crucial, and we all have to do our part. Crystal is a care aide, and she told us that when she works in a care home that they have such close relationships with their residents. We love and care for them as if they are our own extended family. And right now, the resident families aren't able to visit. So we are filling those voids. And that means everything to them. And then on top of COVID, some of our members also face the challenges from wildfires and floods. Angie from 100 Mile House, she helped her residents pack up and she went along with them and redeployed to the Coquitlam Care Center to take care of them. Meanwhile, her own home was under threat. And she said, but the staff there opened up their hearts and we worked as a team and we took care of them. Now, these healthcare workers have continually approached their work with compassion and pride, stepping up day after day in remarkable ways to maintain public health and safety despite risking their own. And they have also been there for each other. Now, they pump each other up with, we've got this, and how can I help like they've never done before. Royson created a group chat with everyone at her work site, allowing them to stay connected at all hours of the day in case they needed motivation for a positive, go down. And when co-workers tested positive, they would take turns dropping off care packages of home-cooked meals and cleaning products and medications and whatever they needed. And Janelle told me once, one of the biggest issues workers are dealing with right now is burnout. We're a tight-knit group, and everyone leans on each other for mental health support because often there's nowhere else to turn. There's so many of these stories of compassion from healthcare workers going above and beyond. And they did so with dedication and solidarity, working together as a healthcare team to support our most vulnerable citizens and each other. But it's taken its toll. Thousands of them have contracted the virus. Hundreds of them have long COVID. The intense and constant pressure, the grief and the loss has led to many of them experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is going to continue to develop and impact their lives in the months and even years ahead. The pandemic has also shone a light on the gaps in the healthcare system, including the low wages and substandard working conditions, especially in seniors' care. Now, last year, BC Seniors Advocate Isabel McKenzie found that the biggest COVID outbreaks in seniors' care were actually linked to the lack of paid sick leave and privatization. So they were largely preventable. Healthcare workers are heroes, but I'm telling you, heroes have their limits. A recent survey found that our members' workload, mental health, family relationships, and sense of personal safety were all negatively impacted by the pandemic, and as a result, 1 out of 3 of our members are looking to leave healthcare altogether, and that could be devastating. That's why we continue to advocate for better working and caring conditions, and now that we're at the bargaining table, we're also looking for better compensation and other supports to ensure that we can encourage these skilled and experienced workers to stay and recruit new ones. And I believe that there's a lot of goodwill and understanding from the public to help us build a better healthcare system. From the early days of the pandemic, when our neighbors banged pots and pans every single night, it was clear that the public had our backs, and that they acted in solidarity to follow public health guidelines to prevent the healthcare system from collapsing, and from those who work in it from collapsing as well. So I want to thank all of you for that. And I am so very proud to be here today to speak on behalf of our members' contributions on the front lines of the pandemic, and I want to thank you so much for this opportunity.
I think in a way I worry I may sound repetitive of many of the things Barb said, because we've all experienced this incredible last couple of years together, and I think you'll hear that so many of us, this is the same story that we've been experiencing over the past couple of years. So my name is Sherri Kensall. I am a registered nurse and the board chair of the Association of Nurses and Nurse Practitioners of BC. And I really am honored to be speaking here today, and I thank you for inviting me here, along with my colleagues from Doctors of BC and from the Health Employees Union. It's great to be with you all. I want to also acknowledge that today we are on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And especially to highlight that today, April 10th, BC is celebrating its first Indigenous Nurses Day. So this is a chance and a special moment in our provincial history where we get to recognize, commemorate, and celebrate the contributions that Indigenous nurses have made to our healthcare in BC and also to advancing the nursing profession. I want to thank the Wallenberg Studio Civil Courage Society for welcoming me here today on Rebel Wallenberg Day. Today we honor all healthcare professionals who have shown courage and determination, particularly over the last few years. These years have included the COVID-19 pandemic, have included the toxic drug supply crisis, and also some severe climate events and emergencies. And also other global challenges such as we are seeing right now in Ukraine, and that is impacting so many people that many of our colleagues who have family and friends have heard of. People enter the healthcare professions because we want to help those in need. We provide judgment-free, safe, ethical care, no matter the circumstances. As a nurse for over 30 years, I've seen countless examples of nurses and healthcare providers and physicians going beyond their call of duty as they work to ensure that the people that we're privileged to care for receive the right care in the right place at the right time. In the beginning, when so many things were unclear, nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, we continued to show up to work, even though we were afraid. We were afraid that we may catch and contract this deadly virus. We were afraid, as Barb mentioned, that we may transmit that to our friends, especially those of us who have frail elderly parents and quite worried about our families. Some healthcare workers even moved out of their homes. They were not afraid of giving this to their friends and their families. We saw firsthand every day how very ill people became with this virus. One critical care nurse described to me the enormity of the emotional burden of caring for folks, which was intellectually very challenging and very complex care needs. But she described to me that before the pandemic, when they were caring for someone in ICU or their family had decided to withdraw life supports, nurses would light a candle in the unit, and they would let that candle in the unit as they honored that person who was passing. That same candle remained lit continuously for months during the first few weeks of that pandemic. Many nurses then and now are working under conditions of exhaustion, in many instances experiencing moral distress from knowing what excellent care looked like and knowing they weren't able to provide that level of excellence because there were so many people to care for. Despite being worried, exhausted, and emotionally drained, nurses demonstrated courage and commitment every day. They've met their professional responsibilities in providing high-quality, compassionate, and life-saving care amidst a constantly changing environment. Every single day it seemed like the rules were changing. And nurses described looking at the door, the indoor and outdoor, and never knowing which one I wanted to make. Then we witnessed not too long ago hospitals becoming protest sites against masks and vaccine mandates, and healthcare providers were actually blocked from entering. Many nurses described being afraid of wearing the uniforms in public and feared going to work. But they would not be deterred by cheers from protesters, nor would they allow patient care to suffer. Amidst the fear and uncertainty of what would happen next, nurses continued to act as role models and demonstrated the importance of following public health measures and becoming vaccinated. They were ready and willing to listen, to provide guidance, and to inform others based on science and evidence. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic is not yet over, and that nurses, doctors, and other healthcare providers will continue to be called on to provide care, to manage public health, and ongoing immunization campaigns. But we had challenges before COVID-19. We are now in our 6th year of the toxic drug supply crisis within this province, and an average of 6 people are dying every single day from the increasingly toxic drug supply. Nurses continue to provide supportive harm reduction, some becoming prescribers of safer alternatives to drugs, some working in overdose prevention sites, and teams of public health nurses providing on-the-ground care to those who need them. It takes courage to care for those that are often marginalized by society, and to relentlessly advocate for meaningful change to a crisis that continues to worsen. 2021 also brought the most damaging weather events BC has seen. Several extreme events, including heat waves, heat domes, wildfires, mudslides, and floods, have ravaged communities. In some cases, whole communities have disappeared entirely. I will personally never forget November 2021. After several days of heavy, extreme rainfall, much of BC's lower mainland had flooded, and effectively it was cut off from the rest of Canada. People were stranded without access to the health care that they need. I watched my nursing and healthcare colleagues devise plans and strategies to provide aid and to offer their services wherever it was needed. They volunteered to work in critical care operations centers. They delivered supplies, medications, clinical supplies, food, water, personal necessities. And they offered help wherever they could. Nurses stranded and unable to get to their work sites instead visited patients within their own community. In my day job as a renal clinical nurse specialist, I work with patients with kidney disease, many who require dialysis. On November 17th, myself and our team worked to assist about 50 stranded dialysis patients who could not get to their dialysis and had missed dialysis for up to 5 days. And this is a life-sustaining therapy. I flew to Chilliwack by helicopter and began to triage our dialysis patients, guided by the information that our teams had rapidly pulled together and my own clinical judgment on the scene. I engaged in complex decisions about who needed dialysis right now, who might be able to wait, and who needed emergency care and needed to be transferred to the emergency department immediately. Incredible crew of firefighters and first responders helped get our frail patients into the helicopters, which was not an easy task. These are quite far off the ground. This is a very stressful event for our patients and families, as you can imagine. So along with making those complex decisions in the moment, I was simultaneously reassuring them that we would keep them safe, we would get them access to the care that they needed. Meanwhile, on the ground, our team worked to make arrangements to support folks while they were away from their homes. Some of them had to be away from home for 2 weeks until the growing conditions had actually stabilized and they could reliably get back and forth to dialysis. While the circumstances were difficult, and there were many hurdles to work through, I witnessed an extraordinary commitment to high-quality patient care. My healthcare colleagues took action and did so quickly without hesitation. Every decision and action made was what the patient needed while away from home. This experience exemplified what we do in healthcare. We maintain life-sustaining care, but we do that to support that within everyday life of those people that we're privileged to care for. I reflected on my words today, my ultimate sense was how proud I am to be a registered nurse and part of the healthcare workforce. I thought about the ways in which healthcare rises to the challenge and the ways we demonstrate courage and commitment to care. When I think of all the health professionals that I have known over my career, the core component of the collective character of each of these is a commitment to service for those in need. It's important during challenging times to remind one another that while there may be hurdles ahead, we've made it thus far over some significant hurdles. We've not been unscathed by the enormity of the challenges, but we have had the benefit of learning from and leaning on our colleagues and experiencing support from our communities. I can't describe how uplifting it was to walk out of a hospital after a long, stressful shift with the PPE mark still embedded in my face, and then to encounter the 7 p.m. cheers and the parade of first responders. It was absolutely incredible. I stood there in awe. I have hope and optimism because of how healthcare providers have demonstrated the extent to which they are willing to sacrifice in order to provide care through a pandemic, through a toxic drug crisis, and climate emergencies, and how the community has supported us through their acknowledgement and through events like this. On behalf of the Association of Nurses and Nurse Practitioners of BC, I want to thank the Wallenberg Civil Courage Society once again for welcoming me to speak with you today. Thank you.
And hospitalist. She is also a child and youth mental health advocate with a passion for social justice. She has been involved in medical leadership for a number of years and held many key positions. Dr. Dosanjh says the ongoing pandemic has taught her that we are powerful beyond measure and that collectively we can make a substantial contribution to the betterment of others. Dr. Dosanjh.
I want to begin by saying thank you. It is with great pleasure, honor, and sincere privilege to address all of you today. And this is my first time in this beautiful building, and I can feel a harmony of spirits. And I just want to appreciate all of the commitments and efforts by the extraordinary Wallenberg Civil Courage Society and all of the previous award recipients, and what I've been able to glean from what you have determined and started in such a humanitarian effort. And by the declaration today of Wallenberg Day by the City of Vancouver, and being joined here by some great colleagues that are also representing the professions and the healthcare workers today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I'm speaking to all of you today is the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I recognize I'm a settler on these lands, and today, before all of you, have the privilege to represent the Doctors of BC. Often attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, the quote says, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us." This quote is not to make light of history or what we have endured individually or collectively, but it is a reminder that we are capable of powerful responsibilities despite hardships that we may face. There's a heightened awareness of the human condition in the air today, a palpable shift, a recognition of the world reflecting and becoming more conscious of its purpose and presence. Unequivocally, the human condition can endure the greatest tests, challenges, tribulations, with its remarkable resilience and endurance. It is a commendable journey, irrespective of how arduous it may be. It is a powerful feat. However, cultivating resilience and patience is not without cost or pain to the human spirit. But it is in this learning that we are reminded again of who we truly are and what we're capable of. I say this as I address you all today, that now, even as doctors in the front line, we can no longer hide our pain or our discomfort, but rather we accept it as a vessel to a rising like never before. The world saw the stories shared as the global pandemic unfolded. Many of us physicians, colleagues, healthcare workers, began to fall apart with the world watching. However, it was up to us and our collective leadership and our spirits to guide and lead like never before. Within the context of a global pandemic, I'm reminded of what is going on in our current world and our state of affairs, as we recognize what is going on in Ukraine, and here at home, the ongoing discovery of the lost lives of the Indigenous children, an opioid crisis, climate change. We're reminded of systemic inequities and healthcare disparities. We have committed tirelessly to humanity in an astounding way. Amongst its extraordinary loss, grief, inequity, uncertainty that has pervaded us personally, our profession, and our society, it has been truly a testament to the human condition. Plagued by the uncertainty and the inequities of this pandemic, I have been reassured by the courageous actions and power of all of my colleagues and all of our healthcare workers, alongside in this journey, our nurses, our healthcare staff, our technicians, our support staff, our security teams, our custodial staffs, all of the teams that we work day in and day out and have jeopardized their own personal risk, psychological safety in this great time of need. I'd like to thank all of our frontline workers, our emergency responders, our essential service workers, our grocery clerks, all of those people in our neighborhoods that showed up for one another like we always knew we could, and we rose to the challenge to make our lives that much easier. We are thankful for all the patience of our British Columbians and our patients who tried to navigate care during one of the most unprecedented times in history. The beginning of the uncertainty in the early days, as I recall in the hospital, seeing the first few cases roll in and seeing an overburdened system being challenged with many more patients suffering with symptoms, not knowing where to go, as well as preparing for leading teams in an uncertain outcome. Not knowing whether you're going to be able to go home and tuck your child in at night, or you're going to spend a couple extra nights in the hospital. Physicians worked around the clock, as oftentimes they do, 24/7, between 20 to 22-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. Some of my colleagues spent their nights in the hospital, not to transfer their germs to their vulnerable populations that also were in their homes. Continuing to do the right thing in the early days, masking, social distancing, keeping to our small circles of 6, and at that, jeopardizing our social connection and our meaningful exchange with many of our colleagues who cried in our arms. We lost some of our vulnerable patients. We saw the vicarious grief and lived that as we watched families not being able to visit their own loved ones. We advocated. Some of our patients in our home care and nursing care
homes, unable to have family. Some of our palliative patients, myself, my dad, going through pancreatic cancer, big diagnosis, and diagnosis to death during the pandemic, and not being able to show up the way that we possibly could. But watching the teams surround the healthcare workers and physicians involved in their tireless efforts day after day, responsibility for the fragility of life, but in a different way. The early days of our rural and remote communities, we were going to discuss how to deal with the demands of the ICU beds when there wasn't enough ventilators to potentially support all of those affected by COVID. To remember Dr. Bonnie Henry and her team and the relentless efforts to protect our province and our British Columbians. To remember that many of our own members have their own personal health journeys and didn't know the consequences to their own health and to the health of their families. Many having to pivot the ways that we worked or showed up in shifts or rallying around our children and the changes at the education and school sector. Now, as we navigate the third year of the pandemic, the moral distress and pressures both personally and professionally have been unrivaled. The fragility of life has been amplified by our precarious surroundings. None of this has been easy. All of us have been affected. Most importantly, the vicarious grief we witness as we watch our patients and humans around us suffer. Yet some may say we have been built for this adversity and uncertainty, that this push comes at a time when we need it most, and when our world needs it most. The reflection of what has transpired begs us to question what learnings can we yield. This question has sought answers from our inner consciousness, and an awareness has ultimately shifted the way we show up for ourselves, for one another, and the world. Medicine is a world where compassion can enlighten the spirit and a bond can alleviate the deepest sorrows, pain, and fears. Where a moment of darkness can transform into an illumination of hope. Our decisions can ultimately grant life. In the words of Desmond Tutu, hope is being able to see that there's light despite the darkness. As masters of uncertainty in our everyday lives and holding the responsibility for the lives of our patients every day, we continue to rise to the occasion. We acknowledge we are tired. We acknowledge that we have had pressures placed on us and the role to show up with intense courage. But we could not have done it alone. The sacrifice and commitments that have been made by all the healthcare workers alongside us with the unwavering support of our British Columbians. These are the moments that can create everlasting impressions, so deeply ingrained within your being that they leave imprints on your soul. Compelling for you to stand forward and continue this act of kindness and bravery and compassion for those around you. So as we use this introspection to ponder our morality, responsibility, and relationship in the world, the entire world is living and navigating into its third year of global pandemic. And by what the work of the Civil Courage Society has done and continues to do in honor, it is the most humbling privilege to be here today with all of you to share. I know my colleagues, they don't like to speak up for the hardships they endure. We have a culture that does the hard work, shows up anyways. And I think with most of them, they felt that their needs were just as important as every British Columbian in the province. as important as our patients and our neighbors and our families and our healthcare workers that continued their best efforts. And the majority of our citizens got vaccinated and did the right thing. So with that, I will close again in such sincere gratitude for allowing us to be and participate this way with all of you today. Thank you.
George, Tim Hall, and Noreen. Okay, and we're going to present these recognition certificates to our speakers who have come on behalf of their professions, not just their associations, but all hospital workers, all the nurses, all the workers. So if you could come up here, hospital workers, please. Dosanjh. That needs to be said here, or shall we move on to the next page? Okay, so we're going to have the, I'll move closer, thank you for the reminder. We're going to go to the room behind us for the film. We could have shown it in here, but the light was too bright for the screen, so it's a little darker there, it's easier to see. So if you could now please exit and go to the back room, there is some tea and coffee and cookies.